Good afternoon. My name is Mike Lebrecht, and I'm the Branch Manager of Waste Services at the City of Edmonton. It's my pleasure to welcome Premier Jason Kenney, Jason Nixon, Minister of Alberta Environment and Parks, and Steve McDonald, CEO of Emissions Reduction Alberta. I want to welcome them to the Edmonton Waste Management Facility. This is a 233-hectare site that sees over 4,500 trucks and 9,800 tons of material crossing our scales every week. And in particular, I want to welcome you here today to the Advanced Energy Research Facility. So this facility is a $22 million facility, and it's one of a number of facilities at the EWMC, including our anaerobic digester and our landfill that have greatly benefited from the investments of through Emissions Reduction Alberta. ERA has invested more than $25 million at the EWMC, and facilities like this one, playing an important role in supporting our policy objective to get 90% of waste diverted. As a result of this support, and through the work done in this facility, the City of Edmonton is currently able to take municipal solid waste and process it into refuse-derived fuel that can be used in waste-to-biofuels or waste-to-energy applications. In doing so, we not only reduce the amount of waste going to landfills, but we're contributing to a lower carbon future by helping partners lower their carbon intensity of their fuels and their processes. We're extremely proud to play a part in such innovative technologies that play critical roles in protecting the environment. I would like now to invite Premier Kenney over to speak. Mr. Premier.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. And it is great to be here to announce investments that will create jobs, reduce emissions, and diversify Alberta's economy. It's wonderful to be joined by Minister of Environment and Parks, Jason Nixon, Steve McDonald, Head of Emissions Reduction Alberta, and Michael Lebrecht, who we just heard from, who's the Branch Manager of Waste Services for the City of Edmonton at Edmonton's Waste Management Centre. I'd like to start by commending the team that run this operation. It's driven by hard-working folks who have done a great job providing essential services to Albertans, especially in recent months. Thank you to all of you for your fantastic work, and to the Centre's state-of-the-art Advanced Energy Research Facility, where we're gathered today, which gives entrepreneurs, university researchers, and international partners space to test out their ideas. The research that happens here helps make everyday products more sustainable while reducing CO2 emissions. It connects perfectly with the research, innovation, and technology-focused future that Alberta is moving toward. Innovative technology can help to get Albertans back to work, to create good jobs, to cut emissions, to save money for taxpayers, and to protect the environment. What's not to like? All of this matters more than ever, because Alberta, of course, has been hit hard by the triple whammy of the pandemic, the global economic disaster, and the energy price collapse. And while everyone's working hard to adjust to these new realities, other big long-term challenges remain. Challenges like being a world energy leader while at the same time reducing emissions. By making smart investments in technology, the private sector and government working with it can meet this big challenge of energy and the environment while creating jobs, diversifying our economy, and ensuring a strong future for Alberta's biggest industry, our energy industry. And that's why Alberta's recovery plan is all about. Government and job creators together with brilliant scientists and innovators can make it happen. We are making it happen. We've been investing massively in research and development to keep Alberta energy competitive. Our industries have a very strong reputation as leaders in innovation and tech, made possible in part by resourceful, forward-looking organizations like Emissions Reduction Alberta, which has, through its successor organizations, been in place for over a decade. So, I am very pleased to be here today to announce that as part of Alberta's recovery plan, we're using $280 million from Alberta's TIER program plus federal funding to support a suite of emissions reduction programs that will create jobs right away. The Shovel Ready Challenge, Energy Savings for Business program, and the Partnership Intake program together will help to industries of all sizes across all sectors of the economy to cut emissions, to cut costs, and to be more competitive. Jason Nixon and Steve will have more to say about the details of these new programs, these job-creating opportunities. Thanks to sustained investment and a lot of hard work, Alberta's on track not just to reduce emissions, but to speed up the pace of emission reduction. Alberta, as I was just hinting at, was actually the first place in North America to put a levy on industrial greenhouse gas emissions way back 13 years ago in 2007. And we've improved that policy with today's technology, innovation, and emissions reduction system, which was a key part of our commitment to Albertans in the election platform from last spring. TIER is helping Alberta industries achieve among the highest environmental, social, and governance ratings of energy producers anywhere on Earth. And since January of this year, TIER, again that's Technology, Innovation, and Emissions Reduction Plan, TIER has helped industrial facilities, which account for more than 2/3 of Alberta's emissions, to find new ways to cut emissions, cut costs, and be more competitive. TIER's saving businesses hundreds of millions of dollars compared to the previous system, and saving them billions of dollars compared to what we would be facing if we did not get an agreement with the federal government, if we allowed them to Bigfoot in here with their own approach on major emitters. And that's thanks to the hugely important equivalency agreement that Minister Nixon successfully negotiated with the Government of Canada last year. Alberta's TIER program creates jobs instead of killing them. It rewards environmental progress by companies instead of punishing them. It focuses on technology as the key to reducing emissions instead of penalizing ordinary folks for heating their homes and driving to work. I'm also proud that combining TIER with Alberta's market-based electricity system, we're driving real reductions in emissions. Alberta's emissions from electricity in 2020 are forecast to be more than 30% below the levels about 15, 20 years back. And we're getting more investment with zero subsidies because of our market-based approach. Of course, the goal is not just to reduce emissions all across all sectors of our economy, but also to create a source of revenue for continued investment in research and development, reducing emissions further. Last month, for example, we announced up to $750 million. It's $750 million from the TIER Fund and other public funding to support cutting-edge projects that will reduce emissions and get Albertans back to work. This funding will support altogether almost 9,000 jobs when federal and private industry dollars are included, and inject about $1.9 billion into Alberta's economy. Minister Nixon's been hard at work announcing game-changing investments paid for with this funding, including carbon capture and storage payments programs, and new methane programs. And most recently, the construction of an amazing new facility in Lacombe being driven by leading-edge, Alberta-made Bio-Refinex technology. That facility will use animal and plant waste to produce renewable gas and organic fertilizer, which will also cut emissions and create good jobs in both Lacombe and in Calgary. So folks, today is yet another important chapter in Alberta's story of innovation. The projects that TIER supports will get Albertans back to work now. They'll help businesses and the economy recover without the cost of new taxes or regulations. And they'll ramp up Alberta's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address climate change. Alberta understands the importance of that, and we embrace our responsibility because we are optimistic. We are problem solvers. We're can-do people. And we know we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can be world-leading energy producers, yes, oil and gas producers, and set the standard for emissions reduction. That's what we've been doing for years, applying our get-her-done spirit to these big challenges. Thank you to the Government of Canada for joining with us on these initiatives, and to Emissions Reduction Alberta for making such a big difference. Alberta is leading the way to a more sustainable and competitive future for energy, the environment, and the economy, and there's lots more to come. And with that, I'm going to turn over the podium to Big Jason.
Well, thank you, Premier. I don't think I'll call you Small Jason. I'll stick with Premier. Thank you to Michael and the rest of the team at the City of Edmonton for hosting us today. It certainly is a pleasure to be here this afternoon at the Advanced Energy Research Facility. This facility is a prime example of what Alberta does best: the research, technology, and innovation and action that are reducing emissions and helping to get Alberta's economy back on track. As the Premier mentioned, I had the pleasure of announcing in September that $750 million from the Industry-Supported Technology Innovation and Emission Reduction Program, or TIER, fund will be used to support leading-edge innovation right here in our province. Since then, I have visited several sites across the province and have had opportunity to see the incredible innovation and technology development in our province. Our industry is truly a world leader. Today, I'm happy to continue that momentum by announcing new programs that will be made possible through $280 million from Alberta's TIER Fund and the Federal Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund. The three new programs being launched today will support projects that reduce emissions, create jobs, and keep our province's industries competitive. The new programs are being delivered by Emissions Reduction Alberta, a valued partner in the work of Alberta's government and largest industries to balance the need of the environment and our economy. What really makes these programs stand out is they will support facilities of all sizes across all sectors in our province. The first new program is the Shovel Ready Challenge, a call for proposals that will support leading-edge technology at large industrial sites. This could be oil and gas or concrete or waste treatment facilities like the one that we're gathered in today. Not only will this drive emissions down while driving job numbers up, it also has the potential to inject more than $500 million into Alberta's economy when industry dollars are included. ERA will also be offering the Energy Savings for Business program. This program will support Alberta's small and medium-sized industries by helping facilities from agriculture to office towers move forward on industrial and commercial projects that can be installed quickly to cut emissions and, most importantly, support jobs. This program is expected to add $300 million to Alberta's economy. Alberta is home to many highly skilled workers. Not only will this program create opportunities for businesses to save energy, but it will also support local contractors and installation experts. The third new offering is the Partnership Intake Program. The program strengthens financial support for new technologies by helping applicants leverage funding from both the ERA and trusted partner organizations and reduces red tape for industry. This program will create opportunities for technologies like hydrogen, geothermal, natural gas, and nature-based solutions. It has been my great pleasure to announce a number of programs funded through our TIER system over the last few weeks, and I'm happy to be here today celebrating the latest suite of game-changing programs being delivered by our friends at Emission Reduction Alberta. These new programs are exciting because they are promoting concrete action with measurable results. Just these three programs alone will support more than 5,000 jobs and cut about 13 million tons of emissions by 2030, which is the same as taking 40 million cars off the road. These programs are examples of Alberta's government working with, not against industry, to create jobs and support emission reduction technology in all sectors and for all business types. Alberta is a province of innovators, and I'm pleased to be supporting these advancements, not creating additional burdens on job creators. We're proud to partner with organizations like the ERA who share our vision and tirelessly support innovative technologies that will help attract new investment and diversify Alberta's natural resource potential. Thank you to the ERA for your important role in supporting Alberta's environmental and economic goals. And to the federal government for seeing this opportunity to bring additional funding forward. Alberta is facing continued uncertainty and disruption due to the COVID-19 pandemic, declining global oil prices, and instability in our financial markets and economies across the world. We have an urgent need to respond to the current situation in our province, while also identifying opportunities for long-term economic recovery, investment attraction, and growth. TIER continues to showcase Alberta's national and global leadership on innovation and technology, which are central to reducing emissions and meeting our environmental goals while setting Alberta on a path to recovery. This is an invitation to the world. If you're ready to invest in the future, to build best-in-class facilities, and to invest in technologies of tomorrow, Alberta is the place to do it. With that, I will pass things over to Steve McDonald, the CEO of Emissions Reduction Alberta. You're good.
Thank you. Pull that down. Thank you, Premier Kenney and Minister Nixon. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to accelerate the innovation that will be the engine of growth for the next normal. Thank you to Mike Lebrec in the City of Edmonton for hosting us today. This facility is a great venue to talk about what's possible for Alberta. As the Premier pointed out, addressing climate change while supporting the economy benefits everyone. ERA's vision is anchored in the belief that our success is measured in both economic and environmental terms. Since 2009, ERA has committed $611 million to support 185 projects valued at over $4.4 billion. These projects are on track to deliver cumulative GHG reductions of nearly 35 million tons by 2030. And they're going to help create the equivalent of over 22,000 person-year jobs by 2024. The $150 million shovel-ready challenge will help us build back better by jump-starting industrial-scale projects. We'll be looking for commercial demonstration projects that have the highest potential to create economic stimulus and improve environmental performance. Projects that are not just shovel-ready, but shovel-worthy. We know that support for small and medium-sized businesses needs to be streamlined and predictable to enable participation. Through the $55 million Energy Savings for Business program, businesses ranging from small manufacturing to office buildings and agricultural operations will receive the right support to help them cut costs and reduce emissions. And the commitment of an additional $75 million to ERA's Partnership Intake Program will help us build collaborations that will deliver better economic and environmental outcomes. Partnership like the one being announced today, which has leveraged $100 million in federal support. It will create opportunities in priorities areas, as the Minister mentioned, including hydrogen, geothermal, and so much more. You know, there's been a lot of talk lately about the importance of pipelines to Alberta's and Canada's future success. Today's announcement and all the related TIER announcements are about building an equally important pipeline, an innovation pipeline, a pipeline that takes the best ideas all the way to scale up to ultimately deliver the products and services that will transform our industries and society. Thank you again, Premier Kenney and Minister Nixon and the City of Edmonton for being our host. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you again, Premier Kenney, Minister Nixon, Steve McDonald, for coming out to our Advanced Energy Research Facility here today. It was our pleasure to host you and to be able to share some of the important work that's ongoing at our facility even today. I'll now pass things over to Christine to lead questions.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'll just note for the media on the line that Minister Nixon and the Premier have to get back to question period, so we're tight on time today. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Our first question comes from Chris Barco of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, this is a question for the Premier. Premier, some provinces and countries in Europe are increasing their lockdown measures due to a second wave of COVID-19. And we've seen oil prices fall below $35 a barrel on Friday, although they've recovered a bit today. Are lower oil prices changing the province's thoughts on the pace of the economic recovery and its own budget plans?
Well, Chris, we've known that in the COVID context, oil prices, the global economic growth, all of this is unpredictable. We've been clear about that. So we gave a fiscal update in August, which projected a $24.2 billion deficit for this year, up from a $6.2 billion deficit that had been projected, I think quite credibly, adjusted back in February. And Chris, let's be honest, we don't know how long this is going to go on. We don't know when it will end. We do know that at some point, stability will return, growth will recover, demand for energy will go up, and supply will be constrained. So much like the recent OPEC projection, we are optimistic in the midterm about a strong recovery in oil prices. And we have seen, as you know, very good prices for natural gas. That's one bright spot in the current economic context. By the way, we also see super strong prices for Alberta lumber products. We see record yields in agriculture. Those things will not undo the damage of the largest ever absolute collapse in oil prices. But we've made it clear that our focus at this time is on protecting lives and livelihoods, which is why we've gone deep into the province's balance sheet to make critical investments both in healthcare and in job creation programs like the one we're announcing today.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Bill Fortier of CTV News. Your line is open.
Hi, this question is also for Premier Kenney. Premier, a University of Calgary researcher crunched the COVID numbers based on the available data online on the province's website, found that the number of new cases is doubling every 2.5 weeks. And by that logic, you would have, by the end of November, 2,000 daily cases. By mid-December, 4,000 new daily cases. Do you believe that those numbers are real possibilities, that could really happen? Do you think that enough is being done right now to stem that growth? Or do you suspect more restrictions will need to be put in place?
Well, we see a significant increase in new COVID cases and active cases all around the Western world, all across Canada, North America, and Europe. And Albertans should be deeply concerned about the current trends because at some point they're going to force us to once again reschedule non-essential surgeries and move people out of acute care beds to make space for a possible surge of COVID hospitalizations. At the peak of COVID in the spring, we had set aside 2,300 acute care beds for COVID patients in Alberta's hospitals, and we'd set aside about 650 ICU beds with ventilator support. Thankfully, we never had to use a fraction of those. And still our hospitalization and ICU numbers, those are the critical numbers, is hospitalizations, ICU numbers, and of course, fatalities. So we've continued to see much lower than the Canadian average in terms of COVID-related fatalities. But we do see if the case count continues to grow, that will be reflected in additional pressure on the hospital system. And that's why Albertans should be seriously concerned. As Dr. Hinshaw says, we should not be afraid of COVID-19, but we should respect it and we should act accordingly. And it's time for Albertans, for us all, to up our game. Government is doing its part by continuing to add to our 800-person team of contact tracers. We are making progress on speeding up test turnaround times, which are a key part of our testing, tracking, and isolation system. We will be increasing our public advertising and education efforts. As you know, we recently announced a restriction on 15 people for social gatherings in Edmonton and Calgary, and we will continue to take action on a targeted basis as necessary to try to contain the spread with the goal of preventing the healthcare system from being overwhelmed.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
The next question comes from Emma Graney of the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Yeah, g'day. Just following up on what you just said there about this personal responsibility and government action. Can you please, Premier, explain again specifically why Alberta has failed to have the national tracing app? Not many people are using the Alberta one. I know you had it first and you're all very proud, but existing users don't have to be transferred over. So why not just embrace that app and just kind of roll with it?
Well, first of all, we don't make these decisions based on rolling with things or embracing things or vapid talking points, Emma. We base them on their public health efficacy, and the Alberta Trace Together app connects to Alberta's contact tracing system, which has led the country in terms of contact tracing. So it is, based on the advice that we received so far, more effective as a public health tool. The federal app would not be connected to our contact tracing system. And indeed, next door to us, British Columbia has expressed similar concerns. Dr. Bonnie Henry, the Chief Medical Officer for Health in British Columbia, said a couple of days ago that the federal app is very non-specific, I'm quoting, and it goes back for 14 days, which to us doesn't make a lot of sense because people are not infectious for 14 days before their test comes back. I know they've committed to addressing some of these issues, but it's not at the point where it would be helpful for what we're managing here in BC for our pandemic right now. Dr. Henry further said, she went on to describe the kind of app that would be helpful to BC, which is actually very similar to the Alberta Trace Together app. So we haven't made a final decision. Certainly when Albertans travel outside the province, they can use the federal app in provinces that they might be visiting if they have signed up. And when Canadians are traveling to Alberta, they're more than welcome to download the Alberta Trace Together app. One of the reasons why it didn't achieve the level of widespread use that we were originally hoping for, but frankly neither has the federal app to this point, was because of a suboptimal user experience, as you know, where the app was operating on the front of people's phones and consumed a lot of battery power. It was not an optimal user experience. Happily, on September 28th, for iOS-based platforms, for iPhones, we managed to download a technical solution, so now it operates on the back of people's phones, and so I just this past weekend loaded up on my own iPhone the new version, which is much more user-friendly. So we encourage people to use that, and that connects them. Should they have a positive close contact, it connects them into Alberta's country-leading contact tracing system.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Janet French of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi there. I'm going to do that annoying two-question thing. I have a question for Minister Nixon and also for the Premier. Premier, just to follow up on Bill's question from CTV, he had asked about any potential role for the Alberta government to proceed with further restrictions. If you look at Manitoba right now, for example, they said their targeted restrictions were not working, and that was why they had to introduce further steps to close things down or limit the hours that things can operate. So I guess I'm just wondering why you don't think that situation applies in Alberta. And for Minister Nixon, I wanted to ask you about just the focus on industrial emitters and why all the funding is dedicated to industrial emissions reductions program. I'm wondering, do you think that those steps are enough to meet Canada's commitment to be net zero by 2050?
On your first question, Janet, I have not commented on, and I'm not going to comment on the approach of other provinces, including Manitoba. Here in Alberta, we announced voluntary measures in Calgary and Edmonton 3 weeks ago. They appeared to have had some effect. The estimated R, rate of transmission in Edmonton, went from 1.5 in the city to about 1.2 2 weeks following that call for voluntary measures. And then, as you know, I think it was a week ago today, we introduced the 15-person limit on social gatherings. Our chief medical officer generally likes to be able to take 2 weeks to identify the efficacy of different measures, either more stringent or more relaxed measures. And so we'll continue to track that. And as I've said, if we need to take additional targeted measures based on data about high vectors of transmission, we will do so while being mindful of the potential negative, broader public health consequences of various kinds of restrictions. So it is the constant effort to calibrate the right balance, recognizing that COVID is not the only public health concern. As you know, we've lost more lives this year to opioid overdoses than to COVID-19. And we've also actually seen, based on the latest data I've observed, that our mortality rate for people over the age of 65 in Alberta is below the 5-year average, but it's above the 5-year average for people under the age of 65, primarily, we believe, because of opioid overdoses. And that obviously is linked in part to the economic collapse and other related issues. So we will continue to monitor how the response to the 15-person limit and other measures that we have taken. We'll continue to expand our contact tracing network and accelerate our test turnaround times. We'll be announcing other measures later this week in terms of our COVID response. But the bottom line is that Albertans have to take this very, very seriously, more seriously than ever, given the direction of new cases and given that the bottom line is this. If you know somebody, if you have a loved one who has been waiting to get into a hospital for surgery, or who may be in a hospital right now receiving acute care, please be mindful that their care may be affected, may be delayed, if we don't get these COVID numbers under control. And so this is not necessarily about the health of younger people, by and large, largely unaffected, but it is about those folks who need the healthcare system. Their care can be jeopardized because they could be displaced by a growing number of COVID hospitalizations, which is why we renew our call for people to take this very seriously. Minister Nixon, on the other question.
Well, first, Janet, the money that we're discussing today is coming from the Technology Innovation Emission Reduction program here in Alberta, which is paid into by just over 160 of our largest emitters. So certainly the commitment to those emitters is that we would be putting this money into a fund and then investing it in ways that could help them be able to meet their emission reduction goals. And so that would be why we would see so much of a focus with this money in particular. In addition to that, though, over 60% of our emissions here in the province of Alberta come from the industrial side. So certainly that is the most logical spot for us to focus. Each province is going to have a different way of dealing with this because each province has different economic needs. The reality is here in Alberta that we have large industrial emissions, and we're going to continue to focus and partner with our industrial partners to be able to make sure that we can make big emission reduction goals. And this was a sharp contrast between us and our predecessors on this very issue. We've been clear. Our focus is not going to be on taxing people while they're driving their kids to hockey games. Instead, we're going to focus on where the big emissions are and also where the big solutions are, because as we've seen and already shown in the last year or so with TIER, if we're working hard with the industry, we can actually get real reductions. And so that's primarily why we focus on the large industrial side.
Okay, we have time for one more. Operator, can you please put through the last caller?
final question comes from Rick Bell of the Calgary Sun. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. Just a quick question for the Premier on COVID-19. You were talking about when it comes to the virus that Albertans have to up our game. And many people have upped their game, as you know, but some people have not upped their game. In fact, they're playing games. What message do you have specifically targeted to those people who, quite bluntly, are still partying indoors, no masks, no social distancing, just partying at a time when the COVID-19 numbers are climbing?
Yeah. My message is knock it off. One of the biggest areas of spread is coming from that kind of private socializing. And by the way, you could shut down all the bars and restaurants, which the data doesn't support. You could do that, and some folks might irresponsibly just continue to have house parties and large private gatherings where we're seeing a lot of this spread coming from. And I would say to those folks, we get it. We're all sick and tired of this. We're impatient. I totally understand. Younger people especially want to get together with their friends. That's just natural. But I would just say, please don't be selfish, because we have a case. We went through. We were able to trace a number of deaths in a nursing home that ultimately came back to somebody's house party. So people's lives may depend on how you act. In your own, you think your friends are not, nobody amongst your friends, if you're younger especially, is going to be sick. Maybe, I think that's what a lot of people imagine. But it's just not right. They may never be symptomatic, as most young people never are with COVID-19. But it can, as Dr. Hinshaw says, COVID-19 loves parties. And so please, if you're doing that, knock it off. Because it might be your grandma, your grandfather, who ultimately gets infected in a nursing home. It might be your mom or dad, who's been waiting for a year or two for surgery, who gets that delayed by months again because we have more COVID people going into the hospitals. So this is, I know people are tired of it. We're all fed up with this. But now more than ever, we need to take this seriously. And the single biggest thing people could do is just stop with the private parties and the social gatherings. Please respect the first 15-person rule. If we just did that alone, we would get this thing under control. I don't think that's too much to ask. And we could get it under control without putting more people out of work or putting even more pressure on the healthcare system.